When I first got to Nashville, I went to a jazz. Got here on a Monday. I was looking for a place all the week, and I said, "All right, I'm going to go to a jazz jam on a Sunday." And by the next or that Thursday after that, I was already gigging and I was working. And so I'm like, "Well, this town's got a lot of work, you know." And then I met the people and the culture of this place, and I was just enamored by it.
Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor. Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults? If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is James Tyler Jaeger. If you haven't heard Tyler play yet, well, just give it a little while and I guarantee you will. After 10 years of honing his craft in military bands, Tyler has returned to civilian life in Nashville and has rapidly become a highly sought-after player for sessions and road gigs alike. And as part of the new supergroup, Vinnie and the Hitmen, Tyler's high-caliber style of playing will be lighting up stages and blowing up on social media before you can even blink. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. And welcome to a new episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang. And I'm hanging with my good friend from years ago, Mr. James Tyler Jaeger. Mr. Jaeger, what's shaking?
Hey, man, I'm happy to be here. I know it's been a while, and gosh, we've been planning on this for about a year. So sorry it's taken so long, but we're all caught up now.
Oh yeah. You know, it's been crazy, you know, just between the stupidness of COVID, and then everything else, you know, and as things have started to open up and people start getting busy, it's nuts, man. But
it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's just kind of get caught up because we were just talking, before we started. It's probably been about 4 years since we've seen each other, and we certainly have had some fun times in person.
Oh yeah. Well, that's an understatement.
Yeah. But a lot has changed for you since the last time we actually had a chance to do a physical hang. So you've made a transition from your military career back into civilian life. So what's that been like for you?
Yeah, well, I had it's been an interesting transition, because you think, I did that for 10 years. So I joined the Army when I was 18. And I kind of had a different approach to the way I wanted to learn how to play. A lot of people go to college and get their undergrads or master's or doctorate. And that wasn't something that was in the cards for me. I was not what you would call an academic graced student. And so I had a hard time just graduating high school. And my dad said, "Listen, man, I was doing really well when I was younger." He says, "I think you should just join the service bands and, get on your feet that way and try to figure it out." And so about 3 or 4 years ago, I said, okay, the next place I go, that's going to be it. We're going to be done. And we're going to, try to make it work. And it so happened that they put me in Nashville. Well, just a little bit north of Nashville, but I said, perfect. That's it. We're going to figure it out from here. And it's been other than COVID, it's been great.
Yeah. Yeah. So you joined up at 18 and you've played with a few different bands in that period of time. So overall, what was your experience like in terms of what you learned and what you got from all that work?
Yeah. Well, it was a pretty good experience. For me, I had a really interesting situation where, I started off, my first band was in Savannah, Georgia. And so I went there and I was only there for 2 years technically, but a year of that was overseas in Afghanistan. And so over there, I got to learn how to, okay, what does a trumpet sound like? I got time to focus in on what that is. And then when I got back, a trumpet teacher of mine when I was a kid said, "Listen, you need to be studying with people all over the United States, everywhere you get to go." So I got to hook up with lessons from all kinds of people and just, do that. And then when I got to Virginia, where we met, when I was in that band, I got to run a big band. And so here I am, at 22 running a big band, and figuring out how that all works. and so that mostly positive. I mean, there's your pros and cons to everything,
Oh yeah.
but I looked at it as an opportunity. I've got a solid paycheck right now to where I can figure out what I want to do. And so I would say it's a good thing. I mean, a lot of people you'll hear will either have horror stories or great stories,
Yeah.
and obviously the DC bands are going to be completely different than what I did with the line bands, but you really get a good grasp on if you want to play the trumpet for a living or not through the Army. And so, luckily for me, I knew I wanted to, and so I just had to figure out the next steps for everything.
Yeah. So what made you decide to make the transition that you've made into the Nashville scene?
Well, as most people would probably, if they've met me, wouldn't think I'm a military kind of guy. And so, which is, I laugh at that.
Yeah.
But when I got to Nashville, I mean, within the first 4 months, I wouldn't even say 4 months. When I first got to Nashville, I went to a jazz. Got here on a Monday. I was looking for a place all the week, and I said, all right, I'm going to go to a jazz jam on a Sunday. And by that Thursday after that, I was already gigging and I was working. And so I'm like, well, this town's got a lot of work, and then I met the people and the culture of this place, and I was just enamored by it, and just the amount of love and support. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the people here, is very enriched with its own style and its own sound. And when I hear a lot of the Nashville trumpet players playing, I love that sound, that big, bright, aggressive kind of approach. And so I said, well, I really like this, and the work is great. And my wife, we really love the area. And so I said, let's do this. Let's just stay here for a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. So did you opt out of the military, and you're just a civilian now, or?
Yes. So I did, the 10-year mark. And so I stayed, this is kind of interesting. I stayed at a certain rank. And so they have this thing where, you can only do a certain amount of time as one particular rank before you have to rank up. Well, I knew I didn't want to rank up. And so I stayed as an E4 for 10 years. And that's one of the running jokes with me and Rob, is that, I started in the Army as an E4. I'm going to finish my time in the Army as an E4. And, that gave me certain benefits on the back end, with health insurance and severance packages and stuff. So I knew I'd be comfortable through all of that. And then I had some medical things too that made me just kind of want to get off of doing active duty. And I wasn't interested in doing the National Guard or doing any of that. But yeah, I just kind of opted out basically.
Yeah.
Just didn't want to do it anymore. And rightfully, I mean, for what I'm doing nowadays, I get a call 2 weeks before a week-long tour, or a 2-week tour, or 3-week tour. And, so I don't have enough time to tell a National Guard person, hey, I can't make it into, this weekend. That doesn't really fly very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I said, for my life and what I'm wanting to do, and for me and my wife, I said, let's just go ahead and cut the ties and be done with it. Yeah.
Well, it's great because, I know a lot of guys that, they think about the military band route, and I really love your approach to it. It's like, you could go to college and pay a lot of money to learn to play, hopefully, or you can go and you can get paid to learn how to play.
Yeah.
that makes sense to me. But, there is certainly that mindset that you have to have to do the time in the military. And, some of those guys, have become lifers, especially like the DC guys, that's, yeah.
And, I think with that, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but those DC jobs, those are some of the best jobs in the world. And those are some of the greatest players in the world. I mean, you look at Graham Breedlove, the Army Blues trumpet section for a great example. Holy cow, man. And I mean, that just swings harder than anything you've ever heard in your life. Same with the Airmen and Note, same with the Ambassadors, same with the Commodores. I mean, those guys are great, and they play, like they've been studying that thing for a while. But for the guy that's just not there yet, for the guy trying to figure it out, I mean, you have another option. And it doesn't have to be the Army. I mean, it'd be the Navy, it'd be the Air Force. Well, the Air Force band, they're a little bit tighter. But Marine Corps is its own interesting thing. But there's options there that I think a lot of people forget about. That, it's just helping you with that next step. Even if you've done your master's and undergrad, both of those, or your doctorate, and you still ain't figured it out, there's you a guaranteed $50,000 a year, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know with freelancing, it's tough, you know, I mean, it's what you make of it, but it's the same thing with the service bands. It's just what you make of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it certainly is nice to have those bennies, you know, on the
Oh
back.
yes. Well, when you're, you know, like I said, when my wife has to go have a surgery or something like that, you're not paying for anything.
Yeah.
You know, or you know, when the world shuts down, you're still getting a paycheck.
Yep.
You know, I
Exactly.
mean, there are a lot of benefits to it.
Yep. Yep. But yeah, you do definitely, for that longevity, you do need to have that kind of mindset. Yeah, a little bit of long-term thinking, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's, like they say, the first 7 years are the toughest.
Yeah.
And so it was. I'm right about that 7-year mark. That's when you figure out if this is going to be your full-time thing or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least you know, like you accomplished what your primary goal was, which was to, you know, to kind of feel out things, first see if Trumpet, you know, a lifelong career in Trumpet is really what you wanted. And then to actually, you know, kind of get, you know, earn your bones, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like it was a great opportunity for you. So now that you're down in Nashville, you know, we're talking about that. Yeah, you know, a lot of people for years, you know, they just thought about Nashville as like country music, you know, country music USA. And granted, you know, it is certainly the country music capital, but there is so much more going on there. And there are so many. I had no idea how many great trumpet players are down there until just the past couple of years. Yeah. So, you know, what's the scene like down there?
Well, I mean, goodness, this is Nashville surprised me in a lot of ways. You know, I looked at living in New York, I looked at living in LA, and the first thing you think of is the price tag of living there. You know, and it's just so expensive to live in New York. And I am not claustrophobic, but I like square feet. I like to be able to have some room, and living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn for $5,000 a month did not sound very appeasing to me.
Right.
And so when I got here and saw that, you know, you can get just as much work and you could live at a third of the price than living in New York or LA, I was hooked. And then, you know, just the richness of the culture down here. I mean, you got guys, trombone player, I'm sure you heard of, Roy Agee, was in Prince's band.
Yeah.
You know, when he did that huge horn section. Vinnie Ciesielski's here, who's, you know, like my dad. You know, he's turned into like my trumpet dad, which we'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure. Steve Patrick, Jeff Bailey, who plays principal trumpet for the symphony here. I mean, they've got a beautiful symphony orchestra. They do a ton of the video game recordings now. I mean, a lot of video games are done here. And so, I mean, there's just so much going on other than country music. Now, there's a lot of country music going on while we're here. I mean, that's what I was out last week with a guy named Jamie Johnson. And that's some country music right there. Every one of those boys had a little bit of a draw to them when they were talking. And so, but it's the best country music you ever heard. It's not, you know, these are the guys that recorded the original. So it's pretty cool to have that aspect. But the jazz culture is really getting enriched here with just a lot of different groups. The funk and R&B, I had no clue how much was down here. The gospel scene, it's just humongous how much music is here. And it kind of blew me away because I was just thinking I'd be playing a lot of Chicken Shack, you know, in the key of G all night long. But, you know, I've probably done every genre you could possibly think of here, you know, in a recording and live situation, in a road situation. So,
yeah, well, that's great. I mean, it's like the area that I live in here in Pennsylvania. You know, I'm like, you know, hour and 45 minutes from Philadelphia, about the same from Baltimore, you know, 2 hours from 2 hours this from DC. I can be in New York. If I take a train, I can be in New York in, you know, an hour and a half.
okay.
Like so it's, and I'm seeing a lot of people who have moved to this area from the metro areas simply because it's cheaper. You know, you can buy a house, you could buy a 4-bedroom house, you know, for, you know, a brand new one for $250,000, $300,000 that, you know, for that amount of money, you'd be living in a shack
in a condo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
we did the same thing. I live about 45 minutes outside town, and I got rid of the Hummer a while ago and got a Prius. I said, if we're going to do this, we got to be a little bit smarter about this. And so I got a Prius, and I have no problem driving into the city because I'm on the north side of town, so traffic's not as bad up here.
Right.
And most of the time I can get into the city about 35, 40 minutes, depending on where in the city. If it's on the south side of town, it takes me a little bit longer. But for me to get to Rob's place, it takes me 38 minutes. And Rob lives right in the center of downtown. Like, he lives right there in Germantown.
Yeah.
And so I love it, and like you said, I got, a 2,700 square foot house for a third of what it would cost if I had to buy it in Nashville proper. And I can't even imagine. I don't even think they sell anything like this in Los Angeles or New York or anything like that. So.
Yeah. And if you're in LA or New York, you can count on a 30 minute to an hour commute, regardless of where you live.
On the train.
Yeah. Just going on the train. Yeah.
It don't matter. And, I can't be driving my Prius I could drive my Prius in the city, but it cost me $50 a day to park that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
No. And, not just the surrounding benefits of Nashville. I'm a big nature guy too. I like to have, trees around me. I like to have just, hiking abilities and things like that to where I can get around and just be out in the wilderness. And here you can go 15, 20 minutes any direction and you could be in some kind of beautiful natural just area.
Yeah.
And so that was a big thing for me to have, to bring the Zen in and be able to just kind of relax.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, being that Florida boy, I certainly understand.
You can take me out of Florida, but you can't take Florida out of me.
Well, that's all good.
Flip flops all year round. And,
yeah. So speaking of Florida, growing up down there, you made quite a name for yourself as a young man. I mean, you're still a young man. Yep. Well, we'll even talk about that. Still a young man.
Yeah.
But you're when you were down there, you had a chance to really work with some great cats and be influenced by some great players. So let's kind of talk about your start, the young Tyler Jaeger, and kind of the things that kind of got you going on the direction that you're on right now.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll start with kind of the beginning of it. My whole family was musicians. I'm like the fourth generation musician. My great grandmother was a vocal coach, and she did this around the 1900s, early 1900s to 1930s, 40s, and probably later than that. But she was a vocal coach in the Charlotte area, and she, that's where my grandmother was from. And my grandmother was the first percussionist for the first female percussionist for the Charlotte Symphony.
Oh, wow.
It's a little strange. My dad tells me about that. But then my dad was a singer and a drummer. And so, we didn't really have any options of if we were going to play an instrument. It was what instrument were we going to play?
Gotcha.
And my brother was a drummer, and I just I couldn't even think about drums. I just said, I just don't want to do this. And my dad had me doing singing and violin, and nothing was really sticking. It was just all horrible. I mean, my uncle was a violinist, and he, showed me a few things. He said, you might want to think about just doing something else. And I said, yeah, not a bad idea. And so when I was a kid, my dad had these old VHS tapes of his band back in the early 80s. And there was this guy by the name of Tom Fox. And if anybody wants to check him out, there's a clip on my Facebook about him. He did the theme to Star Trek, the Maynard version. And it was this band of like 5 guys and 55 instruments. So the B3 player's playing bass trumpet, dad's playing drums and flugelhorn at the same time. This guy's playing, all kinds of stuff. And so he would play this, and I was just enamored by the sound of it. It was just this humongous sound. And I'm like, well, all right, that's what a trumpet's supposed to sound like. So that's what I'll play. And then when I was younger, my dad, he just always had Tower of Power, Earth, Wind and Fire, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Chicago, so that's all I ever heard.
Yeah.
And so, it was up till my sophomore year at high school that I thought a trumpet was only supposed to do that. I didn't know about symphony stuff, or, I knew a little bit about jazz, but I thought it was supposed to be this Maynard kind of thing. Everybody's supposed to play like this. And so when I got to sixth grade, I started playing, and, I really enjoyed it because I was not coordinated. I was short with big feet, and I was not the most attractive guy in the world. So, and I was introverted, extremely introverted. And so I said, well, this thing gets me a little bit more attention. So, I mean, yeah, this is great. And talk about being in an area where you can get some trumpet, inspiration. Orlando is another town where people just have no clue about players. I mean, at that time, Chad was down there, Chad Schumann, Mark Zaus. There's a couple guys that I'll mention here in a minute. But the area was just enriched with so many players. And we had, Terry's down there. And so you have everything you could possibly want for a trumpet.
Right.
And so by about my freshman year of high school, I was starting to get to a point where I just, needed some help. And so we were not upper class or lower class. We were definitely middle class, but we didn't have a lot of money for lessons and stuff. So my uncle, he has a huge company down there, and one of his employees played trumpet. And so my uncle bought trumpet lessons for me for 6 months. Wasn't really going very well. And I just didn't really click with him. He was a very soft approach kind of person. And for me, as a young man, I needed a little bit more, slapping around and making sure I was on track.
Right.
And so my mom made me do the church orchestra, and there was a trumpet player there by the name of Bob Franklin, which is not a household name, but Bob Franklin was the original band leader of the Future Corps.
Oh, okay.
Disney. So he was the original guy, and he would just get after me like nobody's business. And, he'd take me to Terry's. He took me to Terry's the first time I, went there. And he said, hey, man, this is how a trumpet's supposed to sound. This is what a trumpet's supposed to be. And I mean, it was nothing for him to cuss me out on a Sunday morning in a church service for making wrong notes. Like, it was nothing. And I got used to it, and I loved it. And I said, okay, if he doesn't cuss at me as much this Sunday, I'm making progress. And that's what I thought in my mind for years. I thought that. And, he was just one of the greatest inspirations to me, just because he had this gorgeous sound. I mean, you can ask Frank Green about him, Bob Franklin. And we did a tour not too long ago together where it was Frank, me, Bob, and then the other trumpet influence I had by the name of Charlie Bertini. There's another Orlando cat. And Charlie is the GOAT. Like, that is the guy. I mean, you hear him play lead trumpet. There's nobody that does it better. You can just swing so hard, and style is so perfect. So for me, I'm hearing this stuff and I'm going, all right, well, this is what a trumpet's supposed to sound like, all right, this is what it is. And I just grew from there. I mean, I had some great band directors. My first band director was a drummer, so time was really influenced in me. And then the other band director was a trumpet player, and so I got the best of both worlds, so my time in Florida was great. I had a lot of great opportunities while I was there. Those guys really helped me literally, graduate high school and get into a career path. They're great human beings.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, like you're saying, there are so many great players, and there's these little pockets where there's so many great players, but they may not be household names. They're not in the high profile gigs, but they're grinding it out and they're doing tremendous stuff. And it seems to me that you're kind of blessed in so many ways with being in a position where you have all of these really powerful and positive influences on you and to help you to move forward. Now, that's not saying that you didn't work, because, there are a lot of people that have, better situations than you have, and they don't make anything of it. But you were able to take those things and you were able to leverage them. It helped to create the career path that you are on right now. And, it seems to me that, like, right now where you are in Nashville is affording you an opportunity, to take your game to the next level because of some of the guys that you're around with down there. So let's talk a little bit about about some of the cats that you're working with down there and some of the influence. I mean, because, well, I'll just go ahead and start like Vinnie Ciesielski.
Yeah.
Actually, you and Rob are responsible for me getting hip to Vinnie. I had heard Vinnie playing before, never knew who it was, but then I was able to go back and go, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But getting to know him, and he's such an awesome guy. And he has nothing but absolutely glowing things to say about you as a player and as a person. And coming from Vinnie, that's some high praise. So it seems like you've been able to get down there and immediately tap into the resources there, and gain people's respect and gain their support. So who are some of the guys down there that right now are kind of key in your development, and what do you have next on your plate in terms of playing in Nashville?
Yeah. Well, with Vinnie, I'll do a real small brief thing on that first. I remember hearing Vinnie for the first time. It was 10 years before that. And I was in the desert, and somebody got me hip to Here Come the Mummies record. And I heard this trumpet, and I was like, oh my gosh, man, this guy is tearing a new asshole into somebody. This is unbelievable. And I heard that, and I never knew who it was. And then when I finally got to town, I figured it. I put the pieces together. And when I got here, I was getting off of a road gig, and I was having some chop problems. And so I called him, I messaged him on Facebook. And I said, hi, my name is such and such. I just moved to town, like total new guy kind of thing. I said, I'd like to pay for a lesson, And he says, he gave me his number, says, give me a call. That was all it said. And then I immediately call him. I almost thought of it like a schoolgirl crush. Should I wait 3 days after I get the phone number? Or should And so I call him and I said, hi, this is Tyler, 2:00, my house. See you there tomorrow in a session. That was it. I was like, okay. I'm like, all right, sounds good. He sent me his address. And we went over there, and we sat there for 2.5 hours. This is when he was still living in Franklin. And we sat there and we talked and just, got to know each other. And 3 years later, here we are now where, literally I think of him as like one of my dads, because I'll call him for anything, for life advice, for trumpet advice, this new band, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And really, just get grounded perspective, because I have my idea of how something should go, but that's not going to be everybody's idea. So to have the one person you trust that you can go, hey, what do you think about this? Is this too much? Is this too little? Is this, not with money, but with life,
Yeah.
And he'll just give you grounded advice. And, he's nothing, and you talk about somebody that has a reason to be pissed off, with everything that's going on, he's got every reason to be mad and salty and crusty, but he's just, every time I talk to him, it's just the nicest human being in the world. And he's a fantastic trumpet player, like the lights out player. So that, made me realize that, wow, you don't have to be a jerk and you can be a great trumpet player. This is great. I'm glad to see that this exists. But with the players around here, when I got here, I had lived in Virginia for a while, lived in some different places, and there was great players all around. But I had never heard freakishly good players, a lot of them in one place. It was like every gig I was going to, I was meeting a guy that would just make you cry, with how good they were on saxophone and trombone. And then you come to find out they're amazing human beings and they're great people to be around. And so, I was playing a lot of pickup band gigs. I was playing a lot of different gigs where, corporate stuff, and I still do that to this day. I had no problem with that. But I was like, man, I would love to hear all these guys in one band, like just one band. And so we created a band called, it was originally called the Music Row All-Stars. And it was like a mini big band kind of thing. It started off as just 2 trumpets, a bone, 3 saxophones, and rhythm section. And then Rob moved to town. And I said, well, Rob, you got to play in this thing. I'll play, I'll do like the solo man gig and be fine. But you should play in this. And then a trombone buddy of mine named Josh Scalf, who's another amazing player, he said, listen, we need to get another trombone player in here. We got this guy that just moved to town. And I was like, well, okay. So it just kept expanding. And I was like, okay, we're done with the 2 trumpets, 2 trombones, 3 saxophones, me, and the rhythm. And I'm meeting the trombone player, and it's a guy by the name of Ray Mason, who you might have heard of. He was a New York cat, but he was on the original Uptown Funk record. He was on the original track. He was the trombone player on it. Right. And so you're meeting all these people, and you're just kind of like, huh? Like it hits you in the face, like, wow, these are some serious players. And then you hear them play, and it's like, man, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Like, this is not going to help, the situation. I'm not going to have anything to say in this situation.
Right.
But over the years, what I figured out is that when you get to their level, they want to be around the same level, and they want to support everyone that they can, and you want to be as nurturing as you can. And it's the same with the trumpet, players here. Vinnie, of course, being the greatest example of that. Very nurturing, very loving, wants to help whatever he can with. Steve Patrick, very similar. Another name that a lot of people don't know is Mike Haynes. He is one of the original GOATs here in town. Fantastic player. Rob, of course, we've been friends for 12 years.
Yeah.
When we first met. So, I mean, there's so many. And then names that Emmanuel Etcham, is another fantastic player here. And they just make you step your game up.
Yeah.
And those are just trumpet players. I mean, there's a list for every instrument here in town. Yeah. And those guys just make you step your game. They make you play better. And I hope that answered the question right. I can't remember exactly what the question was.
It's okay. I don't remember what it was either. So
yeah. So I just love the fact that this town, you can go literally anywhere, and you could, call somebody and say, hey, I'm in Franklin. What are you doing today? Oh, I'm not doing anything. Let's go get a cup of coffee, and you can go catch up and be fine. And it's like that in any town, but you're doing it with a guy that, great example, a saxophone player I work with all the time. His name is Mitch Riley, and he's from the Bay Area. So that's his style. And it worked perfectly for my, very bull in the china shop kind of approach. But he was on the road with Tiffany back when she first started.
Okay.
And so, I mean, you talk about, that's different, and he played with, he didn't play with Tower Power. He played with the rhythm section when the horns were on the road with Huey Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the Tower Power rhythm section, it was Tower Power, rhythm section, Rick Braun on trumpet and Mitch on saxophone. And so you talk about just a world of just like knowledge, and just you hone into that. And so it's just fantastic. And everybody plays great here. I've met a couple bad players, but everybody plays good here. So it's like, you can call anybody for a gig pretty much. I mean, and so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like, we're talking about the thing about the nurturing and stuff like that. It sounds like it's a supportive environment where it's not like, people are trying to hoard gigs and stuff like that. It's like, it sounds like that the environment is conducive to, if you've got the chops and you've got the personality, you can survive down there.
Yeah. And you said the magic words, chops and personality. I've met a lot of great players that I don't think I'd want to be in the room with more than 5 minutes, but you meet guys here, most of them have a great personality, fun to be around. You can play all night, I can just go. Basically, I always say, if we could be in a bus with you, you're a good person to have on the gig.
Yeah.
Because you get on them bus calls and you're going, like I did last week, Fargo, North Dakota to Syracuse, back to Nashville. Can you imagine being in a bus with somebody that you couldn't stand for that kind of a run?
Yeah.
It's just not the best thing in the world. But and like everybody, we all have our guys that we like to be around. Yeah. We all do, and luckily here in town, I like to be around a lot of people, because it's amazing, personalities and stuff like that. But if you've got the chops and can play a multitude of styles, and you're a great person to be around, you're going to be working. Well, it's just simple. Because I know a lot of guys that have great personalities and can't play very well. Guys that can play circles around people, but just don't have a personality. So it's, I think that's where my luck kind of striked. for me. As you know, I came in with a very learning mindset. You know,
Yeah.
when I came here to town, a lot of guys come into town and they, you know, want to kind of play the way they play, which is fine. But these cats that have been here since the 80s and the 90s, they play a certain way, you know, and you got to match that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, being able to lock in, and like you were saying about like the Nashville sound, yeah, it's you know, obviously like we think about like the LA sound, right? So you know, it's not nothing against anybody, because you know some of my best friends live out in LA and play out in LA, but you know, it's a little more in terms of the recording, it's a little more refined, you know. It's energetic, but it's got a level of you know, it's locked in.
Yeah.
You know? New York, it's hard to describe the New York sound.
Aggressive.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Just very, that's what I say about Nashville, the sound of Nashville. If you took the cleanliness from LA and just that tight, real in the pocket playing, and you took the grease and the aggressiveness from New York and you put it all in one bottle, that's the Nashville sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And so when you go down to Vinnie got me a session not too long ago down in Muscle Shoals.
Okay.
And you go and do Fame recording. That's got its own sound, man. Like that is exactly that world's colliding.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what I love about playing in Nashville is you can go bull in a china shop, but if you, you better be able to articulate it while you're doing it. So
yeah, which is that plays right into your strengths.
Yeah. Well, yeah, bull in the china shop part. Yeah.
Well, no, yeah, but you know, at such a young age, I mean, you're still a young buck, you know, but
28.
But you know, you have that big, brassy, ballsy approach to the horn, which translates so well, particularly in live performances. I mean, that's the stuff that just grabs you. You know, it grabs you by whatever part of the body it grabs you by, and it pulls you in. But you know, you also have the ability to finesse. I mean, I've heard. You know, I've heard you play, you know, just hanging out and stuff like that. I've heard you, you know, sweeten it up a little bit. And then some of the videos that you had been doing over the years, you know, some of the clips that you had put out. And it's like, there's a level, particularly for someone your age, there's a level of maturity that you can tap into in your playing that provides that level of the lyrical concepts. You know, it's the music, you know, you're playing a song, not just playing a trumpet.
Yeah.
So I think that combination really translates well to that environment, because, you know, a lot of guys are super, super great lyrical players, but, you know, when you need them to step on the gas, there's not much left in the tank. But, and I think, especially down in Nashville, that need to just, you know, get into it a little bit, like just really dig into the groove and dig into the grit, the realness of the, because, you know, the music is real, you know, you got to have that feel. So,
well, I think, like you said, I mean, you know, that multifaceted kind of thing, you know, I wanted to be able to play lead, but I also wanted to be a jazz trumpet player. Like, that's really what I wanted to do. You know, when I would hear recordings of Ryan Kaiser and all of these guys that you hear are great, Greg Gisbert, great example. You know, you hear these recordings of them playing lead and they sound great, but I'm more infatuated with their, you know, jazz playing.
Right.
You know? And then my hero, which I have on my wall every day, Bobby Shue. I mean, that is my, if I, you know, I don't want to replicate Bobby Shue because I want to be my own person. But when I think of the approach of the trumpet, that's the guy I go with. And so I remember years ago, I got to do something with him. We were doing a show and I just picked his brain for 3 days about how he does all, you know, how do you think about this? How do you do this? You know, and just being that multifaceted player, you know, being able to play a nice ballad, you know, and I think from a young age, you know, I always want to be able to be the guy that could play the high notes. But as I get older, I'm realizing that that's not the important part. You know, the important part is the sound of it, you know, I'm just lucky enough that I learned how to have that sound all the way up the full register of the horn. And then equipment plays into everything. I mean, I'm the nerdiest equipment guy you'll ever meet. I'm wanting to tinker and toy with everything.
Yeah.
So,
well, don't worry. We're going to get a chance to talk about that in a
little bit. I'm sure. Yeah.
I know you're there for that.
I'm always there for that. You've seen me at the trade shows, man. It doesn't matter. If somebody tells me they got something new for trumpet, I'm checking it out, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I have a credit card waiting.
So that's what that military stipend goes to.
Yeah.
Oh man. So, you were saying earlier about our mutual friend, Rob Kwolek. And Rob is down there with you. And one of the things that you said that really it's impressive, and it's impressed me about you, since I met you. You could hold your own in any playing situation. But like you're talking about Rob moving down to Nashville, and you've already got your gig set up, and you're like, dude, I want you in on this. You take over this lead part, and I'll go off and do my thing. It's that that team player mentality of hey, look, here's somebody who's and Rob is just, for those of you who don't know Rob, you just got to check his playing out. Just a phenomenal lead player, particularly, but I mean, just an all around great trumpet player. But his power and his sound in the upper register, there are just very few people that can play like that. But to be able to, be willing to say, hey, I'll step out of this limelight and let it shine on you, and I can go over and do my thing. It seems like it's a rare thing, and it sounds like it's happening in Nashville, but it seems like a rare thing in the trumpet world to see that kind of willingness to put your ego in check. So, I mean, has that been your experience, with other bands that, would you say it's more likely that somebody's willing to share the limelight, or have you seen a lot of guys that just want to, be the man?
Be the man. Yeah. Well, I've seen it in both ways. A lot of the times, they hire you for a very specific thing. Like for me, they would hire me mostly to do like utility, be able to play a jazz solo, play section, play lead on a couple tunes. With the Tyler Jaeger and the Day Drinkers, which is the band he comes in and Rob plays lead in, I wanted a guy that could play lead all night, and I originally had the chair, but I was just like, well, wait a minute. Like if I've got Rob in town and could make this whole band swing harder than harder than anything you've heard in the world, that's what I want to have. And I have no problem, it's not even you got to think of what's best for everybody in those situations. It's like if I walk into a session and let's say Rob and Vinnie show up, it's a 3 trumpet thing with Rob and Vinnie. I know exactly where my butt's sitting. I'm going right to the 3rd chair. And that's always what I love doing, is being a support player. Because I think that's kind of more of my strength, is because I know what those lead players would want, especially Rob. I know what Rob's going to want as a support player. He wants you right on top of, right with him, and that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, because Rob is such an aggressive. It's so good and so clean and so aggressive that you have to be on your A game playing second. There's no phoning anything in. Same with Vinnie. They're so good that you have to be able to support them that way. But, there are some people that are very, what's the good word for it? They lock in on their gigs. They don't want you to ever, I've met those people, and, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's fine. I don't fear about that. I have my own style. I have my own sound. Rob has his own sound, his own style. And, I tend to think if you're a smarter person, you want to tap into that, and you would want that resource. It's the same with, any place in town, New York, LA, Branson, Missouri, which is a lot of people don't think about, Austin, Tuscaloosa. There's all guys everywhere. I see that in Nashville, it's not as super like this all the time about gigs, but It can be, but for the majority I've seen here in town where guys are just a little bit more, no, come on, let's have you in this thing. I mean, Rob, and being one of my best friends, that helps out too. I mean, how many people can say, one of their best friends is one of the greatest lead trumpet players in the world? I mean, it's so when he moved down, I said, yeah, you got a gig right away. You got to be playing,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and we've been talking about Rob and Vinnie, and it's just become public knowledge that Vinnie has put together a new musical venture, Vinnie and the Hitmen, and and you and Rob are both going to be part of that. So, what kind of light can you shed on what that's going to look like?
Well, that started, I can tell you, Vinnie and I were texting one day, and he says, I got an idea for something. And I said, okay. And we said, we're going to do it with 9 horns and a rhythm section. And I said, that's the biggest horn section I've ever heard of. For basically, you're going to take pop tunes, take top 40, and turn it into just the craziest things you ever heard. We did and I did some writing for him. Just this past week, I did a chart for him. And it'll be Vinnie, Rob, myself. Trying to think of all the guys, make sure I'm saying them right. Roy Agee on trombone, John Hitchie, and Josh Scalf on trombone, bass trombone. And then Tyler Summers, Mitch Riley, and Kevin Gatsky on saxophones. And so it's just like an all-star crew of guys. It's just a bunch of great players. And all of us have the common goal of just hitting hard. The name was interesting. I'm pretty sure I came up with the name. Vinnie might tell a different story, but I've sent him a text message of names about this long. Because I said, when you look at Vinnie and you have that name, we got to play off of that somehow.
Yeah.
It can't be Vinnie and the soft tones or anything like that. I mean, that wouldn't fit our personality at all. So, the Hitman, it's a great opportunity for us to stretch out what we're doing. Kind of like, imagination-ish kind of thing with Jarreau imagination kind of sound, kind of going for that kind of thing. 75-minute show that just blows through. And Vinnie would have a better way of explaining it than I would, but it was something to create something new.
Yeah.
We wanted to do something different, than what we're always doing. A lot of us play September 4 nights a week.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with September. I love it, but we wanted something just a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so that's how that got started, and we're getting everything lined up for the first show. We're going to be doing some online recording stuff so that way people can hear us and stuff like that. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, you get a band like that together, there's going to be a lot of firepower, that you can move around with. That's just, I think Lindsey Miller's playing guitar, who's one of the top go-to guitar players here in town. So, I mean, it's a big ass band, but it's got a lot of stars in it. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, I'm excited about it because, I need to find time to get down to Nashville, and that would be a great thing to add to my itinerary. If you guys work around a gig, and
you come stay here with me. We'll just come stay here.
Yeah, well, my nephew just moved down to Nashville about a year ago, and so it's like between you and him and Vinnie's given me an open invitation as well. So
you're good for a month.
Yeah, I'm not. I'll tell you what, I'm not staying with Qualic though. I'm staying away from him, man.
They got a great. Rob lives right in Germantown too, so they got great bars and stuff around that area, and so.
Yeah, well, he doesn't drink anything good. He's got bad taste in booze. So.
Unfortunately, my first few years, I didn't have very good taste either. So I still get jokes on from today.
I'm one of those people who bust your balls about that.
You remember, and I laugh about it. And that's another great thing about music too. If you can't laugh at yourself, you're just taking life too seriously. I mean, I see people all the time. They get all upset about, somebody joking with them. And it's like, man, you're taking it just too seriously. You're making a great living playing trumpet. That should be as seriously as you need it to be.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's I've always enjoyed, like, with you and Rob and some of the other cats that we've hung out with over the years. It's just, you just get a bunch of guys together and girls as well. Don't exclude anybody. We're inclusive, but it's just a lot of busting chops and just goofing off and just being stupid, basically. But we can do that because there's a mutual respect, as artists, as people, and that's been the coolest thing for me. And that's one of the things I love about doing this podcast, is that I get to meet so many really unique people, talk to some of the greatest players in the world and get to talk to them as human beings. It's not like, you got to kiss anybody's ass, and the best players in the world that I've had the opportunity to talk to, they all are acutely aware of where they're not so great, where their weak spots, weak spots are, their goofiness about them. So, it's that humility, and, that's the only way that something like, the Hitmen comes together and works, is because everybody's got to kind of put their egos in check and just, say, hey, look, I'm good, but, together we can be super, super great. So let's have fun. And I'm sure rehearsals have a really interesting balance of
comedy.
Pushing and comedy. It's like that seriousness, but then also it's like, you got to keep it loose a little bit, So that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. And, I chat with Vinnie every once in a while. So, we'll make sure that, as things come up, if you guys keep me posted, I will make sure I promote the hell out of it myself.
Yeah, man. We'd love to have you down here just to have fun.
Oh, you know what, man, I got to get down there and I've only been in Nashville once and I loved it. So I got to get down there again, man. Get some good food, get some hot chicken.
Oh, yeah, they got that here. We'll take you to the real hot chicken. There's a hot chicken joint down in Donaldson called Princess Hot Chicken. That's the best you're going to find in town. Man. Cool.
You're talking my language. Talking my language there, man.
Best you're going to find.
Yeah. So what else is kind of, been going on with you in terms of your your idea of your career? I mean, you've got all these little side projects and stuff, these things going on. I mean, what's the big picture for Tyler Jaeger? Where do you see yourself like in the next, 5-10 years?
Well, for me, I've got a lot of projects going on and stuff, and it's kind of hard to narrow everything down, but for me, I'm having a great time doing studio stuff, having a great time. I just past month or so kind of upgraded my home system, so that way now when I'm sending a track out, I'm sending it out with really good stuff. I just got the Barkley microphone. I use Logic and all that stuff, but just not only that, doing the studio stuff, but I love touring. It's probably one of my favorite things in the world to do. You get on the bus, you just relax, you do what you want to do, and you play a gig, and you go back on the bus. That's it. So I'll probably be, touring with somebody, and doing that thing and just working. As much as I love touring, I like being at home and relaxing. And, I think for me, within the next 5 years, my goal is to find the balance in life. Right. Finding that, because when I was younger, I just went all the way. I just went a million miles an hour. And when about 26, about 2 years ago, that's when I could feel it starting to hit, and starting to finally catch up. And so finding a balance to where I can be on the road, be at home with my wife, be at home with the dogs, and, still playing, 3 or 4 nights a week. I think that's everybody's balance. I'll go 1 week where I'll do every day, and then the next week is dry. So it's like trying to find a balance with everything is mostly my goal.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I remember having a conversation with Wayne Bergeron once about touring, and he was saying how he can't go out on tour or made that decision to not go out on tour because he had worked so hard to get into the studio scene in LA. And it's like, hey, if I go out on tour for 6 weeks, then, my gigs, my studio gigs will end up drying up because, they're going to call somebody else. And, and it's not like, there are very few players that can replace a Wayne Bergeron,
Right.
but it's still the thing of like, if you're not available, they got to go with who's available. So you start to lose those calls. Mm-hmm. And so he said, it's a very conscious decision to say, I just need, if this is the work I'm going to do, this is where I need to stay as much as possible. Because it sounds like the LA recording scene is so busy and there's so many trumpet players there that, if you're not there, you're it's a out of sight, out of mind sort of thing. Yeah. Is Nashville the same way? I mean, or does it afford you to be able to go out and to tour and to come back and just knowing that there's always going to be work for you there?
No, very similar. And there's your guys, there's your set crew of guys that do a lot of the work. Steve, Patrick, Jeff Bailey, Preston Bailey, his nephew, Mike Haynes. Those are the guys that are doing it every day. They're doing the sessions. And then there are guys like Vinnie who do all of the 3-man horn sections or the 4-man horn sections where you're doing, pop tunes and stuff like that. So, I mean, those guys have made their lives around the recording. For me, I have the capability of it. I love doing it, but, that's not really where my passion is at.
Yeah.
My passion's at playing live, which long-term probably for me, it's not the best. But, I love being on the road, and I do love recording. I mean, because then you think about it, you play it one time, you never have to play it again, but it's something about, some studios you go into, they're really relaxed. Everybody's real calm, hey, we're going to get these 2 tracks done and we're going to be good. And then there's sometimes, boy, they're in there and you fart the wrong way and they're going to start getting mad at you. And it's just like, dang, man, it's just so it's little. I mean, with everything in life, it's like that. I mean, you're going to have both sides of everything, but the session stuff here in town, it's not locked up. I mean, they're going to have their first calls no matter what.
Right.
But you might be able to do both. I know a couple guys that do it, but you do have to kind of go with, well, do I want to be a recording guy or do I want to be a road guy?
Yeah.
And so everybody's different. Everybody has their different kind of thing they want to do. And so I tend to think, as long as you stick with it and I'm going to do this, I'm going to be on the road with somebody, then you'll be good.
Yeah. That sounds solid. All right. Well, we've got a couple of segments. I always say segments that we need to get to. Okay. And the first one is brought to us by our mutual friend, good friend at Barkley Microphones, Mr. Michael Barkley. And best mics for the money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
This is our sound off segment, and we're going to talk about sound. And you already touched on this a little bit about your what the sound that you hear in your head. But I just want to talk a little bit more about what approach do you take to developing concepts of sound, and maybe some advice you could give people who are searching for ways to create the sound that they hear in their head and get it out the horn.
Yeah. Well, number one is listening. You have to be willing to listen, until that sound is conceptualized in your head. Luckily for me as a young man, you're just learning at that point when you're 12, 13, 14, and that's the sound you hear. It's a little bit harder when you get older, but really just sitting there and listening and let that sound. And when I talk about just listening to the sound, it's not just even that. It's listening to the articulation, listening how he interprets a line, listening to how he phrases a line. When you start listening to all of those things, all of those nuances come into your playing, which eventually turns into a replication of a sound. And then you can make it more authentic by doing it your own way. So for sound concept, that's what I would first say. Get a favorite recording of whoever, Doc Severinsen, Maynard, Bill Chase, Jerry Hay, Wayne, any of them, and just listen to what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah. I think that's, when you can get to the point where you can identify a player by their sound, it's like I've listened to so much Jerry Hay, and I've listened to so
Yep.
much of that sort of stuff over the years. It's like, as soon as I would hear recordings, like, yeah, that's Jerry.
Yeah.
And, and those are the things that it's a good mark for the player, to say that their sound is recognizable, but it's also then that good ear training for you and, helping to develop your overall concepts. Of course, if I could sound like Jerry Hay, I wouldn't be doing this.
I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'd be drinking wine. Like
I would be drinking wine. Yep. Except I'm drinking Mountain Dew. So
yeah, I'm drinking coffee today, so it's too early to tap into the good stuff.
Yeah,
All
not
right,
with that attitude.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so our next segment. This is our geared up segment. This is where we're going to talk about gear. Tyler Jaeger's favorite is brought to us by our good friends at Venture Mouthpieces, where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect. So let's talk about gear, and with gear, it's not the typical what horn and what mouthpiece you're playing. Yeah. I want to talk about, again, like a concept. What is it that drives you in terms of your search for gear, your never-ending search, because we're all on that never-ending search. But what are the things that you look for your instrument and your equipment to help you to do, and how do they help you to do those things?
Yeah, well, when I'm picking a trumpet, I want it to, the feel is the most important thing to me, because I know that the sound is going to come out of my head. I know that I can get that. So the feel of the trumpet is the most important to me. And I've played all kinds of different horns, but, when I finally landed on the one that I'm on, I've been on it for a little over a year and a half or so. And with the gear selection, I want it to feel great, then sound good. And then, obviously every small thing in between that, pitch and all of that stuff, but everything can be dialed in if it feels good. Mm-hmm. And so there's a guy by the name of Ken Larson that owns Larson Brass Works. And I was playing a horn at the time, and he just looked at me and said, well, I could make something similar to that and it'd play easier. And I was always afraid of the word easier or more efficient. You hear that one all the time. Or more, I don't know what another word for efficient was. The one that always made me just go, like I hated that word. Because I just want to be able to go, when I put the gas to it, I want it to feel like I'm putting some gas in it. Yeah. And so he made me this B flat trumpet, and it just took my breath away. It just really, because I could get that big sound, in the upper register, but I could put a separate mouthpiece in and just be able to float away, like just, and do everything in between. And so when I, luckily he's been able to walk me through kind of how to narrow everything down on the trumpet to pick what you like. I like a bigger front end on a lead pipe and the resistance to come from the bell taper, as he's told me. And, mouthpieces, that's a tough one. I use two different people. I use Greg Black and Ken Timmons. Greg has made almost every one of my mouthpieces that have been recorded on here in town, just because his craftsmanship is unbelievable. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he is by far the most knowledgeable guy when it comes to hand doing a mouthpiece. And so I got out of my 4 that I take out on the road, he's made 3 of them, and then I've had those copied so that way I don't lose them. And then Kenny, as you know Kenny real well, he created this backboard thing that was just like unreal. And I was like, wow, this thing you can really put some gas to it and really light up. And my equipment is so weird that I never suggest anyone trying stuff that I play on. Yeah, because it's just so different than what anybody would normally play on, that it's like, but the generic stuff like the Maker or a backboard or something, or a trumpet, I'd say, you should try this. But when I'm looking for equipment, I'm looking for the feel, the sound, and then the pitch. Normally some people would say the pitch first, then the sound, then the feel. But if it just doesn't feel good to me, I'm just not going to play on it.
Yeah.
it's just not, it's not in my vocabulary. And so normally if it feels great and it sounds great, the pitch will kind of line up in there. If not, that's why we have first and third saddles, you know. So
and auto tune
and melodyne.
Yeah,
a lot of melodyne.
Yeah, you got yeah. I'm gonna take my horn into the shop and get Melodyne permanently installed in it.
Yeah, man, if they could do that, whoo, I'd spend some money on that.
Game over, man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's really interesting because you know, in all the conversations I've had with different players, you know, whether it be, you know, legit players, commercial players, whatever, there's so many different opinions on gear. You know, you can get all kind of arguments about, you know, size and blah 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 blah, but you know, the consistence seem to be, you know, it needs to feel good, and you know, it just needs to, you know, it needs to, like, I think James Morrison put it best, that he's like, he told me that he didn't look for the horn to add anything to his playing. Yeah, he didn't want it to do it. He wants it just to do what it does, but just kind of get out of the way and let him do, you know, because like you said, your sound is going to come out. You know, you may pick a new mouthpiece or a new horn, and you're going to sound a little different for the first, you know,
3 months
or 3 months. Yeah. And then after that, you're still going to sound like you. So, you know, it's just finding the gear that is more in sync with you. Yeah, it has that right feel, like you know, like you're saying, like the resistance, where you like the resistance to be, you know, or, you know, just even the weight of the instrument. You know, I
didn't know how much that played into it until really Greg taught me. I had a mouthpiece made by him, and he took a bunch of weight off of it. And I was like, holy cow, man, this thing just lights up like crazy. And he goes, well, yeah, you took off 2 ounces. And I was like, well, what, I mean, I don't know if I like that or not. He goes, well, that's what happens when you take off 2 ounces of weight. And so you think about that in anything, those heavy caps that people talk about, you know, people joke about that stuff all the time, but it's going to do something.
Yeah.
You know, it might make it better, might make it worse, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it gets back to sound concepts, you know, and what's, you know, if you're trying to get that super dark, you know, or kind of, you know, if you want to be Chet Baker, then you can get by with something like that. You know, if you want to be Maynard, that's happening. Yeah. I mean, maybe you can make it happen, but you're going to have to work like super, super hard.
Yeah.
The direction to do that.
I only know one guy that plays one mouthpiece. That's Rob. He plays one mouthpiece for everything. It's basically a cushioned 5C.
Mm-hmm.
And he can do everything on it. But I'm not blessed with that kind of talent. You know, I'm a kind of guy that I have my pouch right here. You know, I take this on the road with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
And that's going to get me through anything. You know, you know, I mean, that's 15 years worth of time pretty much, you know, but I mean, you know, if I want to sound like Chet Baker, I take that mouthpiece out. If I want to be if I got to be Maynard, you know, I'm never going to be Maynard, but if I got to have that kicking sound, I put that mouthpiece in. And so, yeah, I think people get a little bit too far into gear, because I know I certainly do. But I think sometimes it's overlooked as well. You know, I think it can get in your way. But most of the time, I think it's just, just thought of too much.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's the end of the chain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything starts here and here. You know, it starts in your head and your heart, and then your technique. And I think that's another place that people get kind of caught up. And you know, yes, you need technique. Technique is what allows you to express your ideas. But if you got shitty ideas, great technique is only going to make.
Yeah, they're gonna make it so good.
It's still going to be bad.
It's still shitty.
Exactly. You know, and the same thing with a horn. You know, it's like, you know, but if everything is working, then you know the horn is kind of the last piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on we start working backwards. Like, well, if I get a great horn, then that's going to make me sound better. Well, no, you got to start with your sound concept.
Yeah.
Right? Fix your sound concept, and then the horn is it's the amplifier.
Yeah.
So, so
no, I agree with you.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, we're going to get into our last segment. And our last segment is brought to us by Robinson's Remedies. It's the Robinson's Remedies rapid fire round. The stuff that goes all over the place, kind of like your chops at the end of a gig.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we need the Robinson's Remedies. Yeah. Get that swelling under control. So these are a series of questions, Tyler, that are going to go all across the board. And I just need your quickest response to this series. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. There's a strawberry Rita. If you get this right, here we go. First one. Who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
My dad.
Okay. What is your favorite book?
The Inner Game of Tennis.
What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Oh, I think I saw Titanic 2.
That came back?
I think there was it was either that or I know I've seen Leonard Part 6 with Bill Cosby, and that was horrible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was bad. I mean, Bill Cosby as a superhero. You think about that one. That's,
yeah. I hate to admit it, but I have seen it. All right. If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
I wasn't a trumpet player. Probably work at a distillery.
Oh boy. There goes your paycheck.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, what's your favorite drink?
Oh, well, I've been really getting into Evan Williams right now. Not the black, but Evan Williams. 1792 is really good. Mm-hmm. But they have a white bottle that's really, really nice.
The cask strength.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's a good one to sip on.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I just bought a bottle of that the other day. Yeah. You could have a dinner party and invite any three living people. Any three people in the world could be guests at this dinner party. Who would you invite?
Well, I probably would invite Barack Obama, number one. I probably would invite Doc, because that would just be an interesting conversation. And then I would invite a singer named Delbert McClinton. Delbert was a singer, and he just, when I moved to town, to make this short, he helped me basically move my wife. Well, at that point, my girlfriend, but he helped me move my wife to Nashville. And so.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I would invite those three people.
All right, cool. You have 3 additional chairs at your dinner table, and you can invite any 3 people from history, any 3 people that are no longer with us.
I invite my grandfather. I would invite Martin Luther King, and I'd invite George Washington.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
And let's see. Next question. Lacquer, plated, or raw?
Raw.
Tyler likes it raw. Yeah. All right. What's your favorite quote?
Make sure I get it right, so that way when I was in the Army, I was young, I had a boss tell me it's not the loudness of your voice, but the power of your words. You know, he said something like that. He says, you don't have to yell all the time, you know. And so that hit me hard. And so that's always been my motto, you know.
That's cool. Yeah. That's powerful. All right. What is your greatest fear?
Failure. Yeah, failure would be my greatest fear.
All right. You could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Oh, I'm flying. I want to be able to fly. You know, actually, I'm watching from the 90s, Lois and Clark.
Uh-huh.
And so for the past month, you know, I'd love to be able to fly, you know.
That's
think about how many gigs you could do if you could do that.
Exactly. Yeah. I would go for teleportation.
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah, because flying, you still got to, you know, it's still time, man. If you could just go and you're there. I mean, I
didn't think about that. Yeah.
You could pop back and forth between measures, man.
Well, can I change my answer then?
You can change your answer.
Yeah, I'd do that then.
Okay. All right. There you go. All right.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
Oh, high notes. Gosh, if I get a message every day, it's about high notes. Yeah. Man, if I could just tell people the trumpet ain't about that. Trumpet's about music. Yeah.
All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most underrated?
Time. When I say time, I mean your feel, your pitch, your sound. You know, I hear guys all the time, they come in and they just play as high as they can or whatever, or they play the fastest jazz league, but it's all out of time. Nobody's got any feel to anything. So I think it's the most underrated thing.
Okay, cool. You could go back in time and give your younger self, which obviously isn't that far to go. You can give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Slow down.
Okay.
You don't have to learn it all at once.
All right. And while you're back there, you're going to give your younger self one piece of advice about life.
Slow down. You don't have to make every decision that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. We push the issue.
Yeah.
All right. Final question for you. For James Tyler Jaeger, what do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that I help people. I wouldn't want anyone to think that I held information into them. I want to be these guys that have been so nurturing to me, through my career. I want to give that back. I want people to know the same deal. He nurtured and helped everyone that came his way. So that would be what I want my legacy to be.
Oh, well, that's a good one to have, man. And I think that if more people, regardless of what we did in life, whether you're a trumpet player or a
janitor, doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's all about helping those who need a hand, and that's at the end of the day, that's what gives me fuel. So I'm just really happy to hear that I'm not the only idiot out there. So
no, you got me. Don't worry about that.
All right. Well, Tyler, man, it was so great catching up with you. And, you've got such a promising career ahead of you. And I think the great thing and the thing I love about you is, you definitely have the talent, but you also have that mindset, that you're driven in the sense that you want to push yourself forward. You want to do more, you demand more of yourself, but also have that level of humility and the humanness that will keep you around for a while. So
yeah, well, like you say, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. We don't need to dog our mistakes every time it happens.
Yeah,
it's just going to happen.
Yeah. So, it's just what do you learn from it?
Yeah, what do you learn? So good Lord, I know I've made enough mistakes in 28 years. So
well, you're wise because you're getting them out of the way now. Don't be like you wait until you're 60 to start making all your mistakes. So.
Then it's terrible.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for hanging with me, man. I really appreciate it. And make sure you keep in touch with Tyler. Follow him on his social media accounts, and certainly keep an eye out for what's going on with Vinnie and the Hitman. That three of the most phenomenal trumpet players you're going to catch individually. They're phenomenal, but I'm sure that the three of them together is just going to be completely mind blowing. So stay tuned for more from Vinnie and the Hitman. Maybe that's what we need to do. We need to get the Vinnie and the Hitman section together. The three of you on one hang, and
that's dangerous.
I think that's going to be the live one. I'm going to have to come down to Nashville and do that one live. We'll do it from Vinnie's poolside.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. We'll have the dogs running in the background too.
Yeah, that's all good. All good. I love you, big dog, man. All right. Well, thanks again, Tyler. And thanks for joining us for this episode of The Hang. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share, and do all of that wonderful stuff to keep the hang going. And until next time, peace and slide grease. We out.